Welcome back once again, everybody, to the channel, and it's my number 9 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Wow. Like, comment, and subscribe. All that stuff helps out boost the channel algorithms, all that good YouTubing stuff. And Jacksonville, man, they came out of nowhere last year. Doug Peterson did a great job. Trevor Lawrence took that little next step forward, and they are benefiting greatly from having an absolutely horrendous division that they're in. So they're really primed right now to take over, and that's why they get the number 9 ranking for me. Remember, I'm doing this based upon my predicted records for them, and this is a team that I'm predicting is going to win the division and win it probably quite handedly. I don't anticipate them losing any divisional games at all this year. We'll get to that in the record prediction. They're just an extra level better than even the next best team. I do expect bad things from this division in general. Maybe some slight overachievements from a team like Houston. But for those of you that have been following the series, look at where I got these division teams ranked. So they're going to benefit a lot. About half of their wins, more than half of their wins, are going to come within the division, which gives them a giant advantage. How they match up against the rest of the league, though, I think you'll see throughout this video with the grades that I give them as individual players and as entire units, offense and defense, passing defense, rushing defense, that you'll see that there's still a long way to go for this team. They might be, on paper, the worst team in my top 10, which is weird because they're 9th. But again, that's because they're going to finish with a better record than the Detroit Lions, who were just number 10 in my ranking series. Go check out that video if you haven't already. But Jacksonville has everything going for them, I would have to say that. They've done a great job. They got their franchise quarterback. Barring some type of drastic regression, this is the guy, Trevor Lawrence. He showed last year that he's probably going to be everything that people thought he would be, which is great news for the Jags. And he got there because of Doug Peterson, who just continues to show, much to my dismay, that he is actually a really good head coach. He was kind of thrown under the bus with the whole Carson Wentz thing that went wrong in Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni, still a great coach, but he seemed to be the scapegoat a bit there for what was Carson Wentz just turning out to actually not be able to bounce back from that devastating ACL injury and then the subsequent injury that followed the next year. And I think him coming in this year and taking a team that a lot of people had as a bottom 5 team and taking them to the playoffs, winning a playoff game, that was fantastic work. And of course, gained Trevor Lawrence to the next level with an offensive line that has been questionable, that still is kind of questionable. We'll get to that. With a overpaid wide receiver in Christian Kirk, who now is, I think, taking his proper place as wide receiver 2 on this team. With the trade of Calvin Ridley, who turns out he is going to play. How much Calvin Ridley will have to knock the rust off, so to speak, is still yet to be determined. But according to Colin Cowherd, him and Trevor Lawrence are the second best quarterback and wide receiver duo already, which is odd to say. And they got a great running back room. I actually really like the weapons they have. They got really good depth at tight end. Evan Ingram, sort of like a big slot type. He's never going to block. They drafted Brenton Strange, I think, in the 3rd round, and they drafted Luke Farrell last year. So they got a nice variety there of tight ends. Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, who they just drafted. They got D'Ernest Johnson. They got JaMychal Hasty. They got Jamal Agnew, who's sort of like that gadget type of a guy. They drafted Parker Washington, which I think is flying under the radar a bit there, but I could see him getting some real reps on this offense as well. The defensive side of the ball, Tyson Campbell had a breakout year. Darius Williams and Trey Herndon, they're good. They're a nice little group there. I think they could be better, but I think that what's going to help them move forward is the development of the pass rush with Josh Allen and last year's number 1 overall pick, Travon Walker, which if he came out this year, I think people would be thinking of him a lot more highly, I would say. I think Tyree Wilson personally can thank him for coming out last year. because I think Tyree Wilson made a lot of money taking up that role that I think Trayvon Walker would have filled this year in the draft. The interior of the defensive line, they got some depth and they got some potential. They had Fatukasi, who underachieved. Roy Robertson-Harris kind of made up for it, but he's not really that true interior guy. You kind of like him more as a 3-4 defensive end. They did draft Tyler Lacey, who I like. We'll get to that as well. Devon Hamilton just got extended. So they really are doing a good job of building the team from the interior. They drafted Anton Harrison on the offensive line, who actually, because of Cam Robinson's suspension, is going to get some playing time in the first 4 weeks of the year and a chance to establish himself as maybe a starter going forward. Him and Walker Little are going to have a real chance to prove themselves. And then the linebacking group that has some depth to it as well. It's a really interesting group. It's just a team that's still looking to meet its potential. And I think throughout the year, you're going to see this team grow. And I think the initial rankings and grades that you're going to see that I gave them, I think that by the end of the year, they're going to be much higher than what they are. So Jaguar fans out there, don't kill me over this. Don't kill me over the rankings yet, because I do believe that they will be better as the year goes on. That's my projection for them. You'll see it with my record predictions for them as well. You'll see what I got them doing in the second half of the season. I just think it's going to take a little bit of time, get Cam Robinson back, get past those two United Kingdom games that they're playing 2 weeks in a row. And I think that once they get past that, some chemistry with Lawrence and Ridley, they'll figure out a way to use Ridley and Christian Kirk together. But I've been on this more than enough, this intro. Let's get to the coaching grades to start, like we do with every other video. So this is my number 12 coaching staff in the league. And the reason why it's not a little bit higher does have to do with the coordinators. I think Doug Peterson is a top 10 head coach in the NFL. But I do think that the strength of the coordinators does pull it down a little bit. Not taking anything away from these coordinators. Not going to do that. But I think that there is something to be said about the coordinators on the other teams. Now, preface that enough. Doug Peterson did an amazing job last year. I think that when he was hired, there was a little bit of question marks around just based on what happened in Philadelphia. I think, like I said, he was a bit of a scapegoat for the Philly fans. And I think that last year he proved, no, he's actually a damn good head coach. He can get the most out of his players. He understands how to put players in situations to succeed. And I think that him paired with Trevor Lawrence has become a match made in heaven, really. I think there was so much potential on this roster last year with Urban Meyer, and they really did blow it by being the worst team 2 years in a row. And he came in, he changed the whole culture of the team. I think he gave them a lot of confidence, and we saw that build as the season went on. And then we saw them come out in the second half. A lot of people want to blame the Chargers and Brandon Staley and the analytic style coaching, which if you go back and watch my Chargers video, I crap all over it because I hate it. But I don't think that you can just blame it all on that. I think Doug Peterson, the halftime adjustments they made, making sure that the team didn't get too down on themselves and making sure that they understood that it was still possible to win that game, especially a young team like that. That was really impressive on his part and on that roster's part to stick to the game plan, make the adjustments that needed to be made, and to pull out the win. It's really his offense, really, at the end of the day. Mike Caldwell does have the control of the defense. That's the reward, I guess, for a defensive coordinator who's got an offensive-minded head coach, is that a lot of the defense stuff is down to you. And I think he's got his work cut out for him. He was given a very raw prospect in Trayvon Walker, and he's got to get the most out of him this year. He has to develop Trayvon Walker into at least being a legitimate number 2 edge rusher by the end of this season, something Trayvon Walker kind of struggled with throughout most of the year. And he's going to have to get him to produce as a 3-down edge also. Because you think on running downs, Roy Robertson-Harris is going to be the 3-4 defensive end. Fatukasi is likely going to be the nose tackle. And then you got your 3 technique, which could be any number of different players, and we'll get to that eventually. Trayvon Walker's going to have to play on that outside. Josh Allen is a good run defender, really good at setting the edge. He's a true 3-down, all situations edge guy. You need to get that out of Travon Walker, and that's going to be up to Caldwell to help develop him in that way. He's also got to figure out the linebacker rotation with Devin Lloyd, Oluokun, Chad Muma, Shaq Quarterman. He's got some good guys in there. I think Oluokun is that 3-down linebacker that you're going to see out there. Did get a lot of tackles last year. I don't think he's as good as the stat sheet said he was. And for Jaguar fans out there, I'm a Giants fan. Tate Crowder got a lot of tackles too. And I'll leave it at that. How to use Devin Lloyd, a first-round pick, I think is also going to be a task for him. Because he's kind of the third best at everything. So you got a couple guys that are better than him at in pass defense, but not as good as him in rush defense, and then vice versa. So helping develop his game to get him to be that true, you're hoping number one linebacker. Really, by the end of the day, you kind of want a Oluokun who's very much undersized. I think he only goes about 225. You may want to use him more as like a money backer type role, especially on passing down. So you want to get somebody like Devin Lloyd out there, to play like an athlete role, but still be a true linebacker. And how Caldwell continues to develop a guy like Tyson Campbell. I think that they stole Texas A&M defensive back Antonio Johnson in the last draft cycle. I think you could really use him, at least in the run game early on. He has to develop him, though, in pass coverage. The pass coverage aspect is what tanked Antonio Johnson's draft stock throughout the process. He was viewed as like safety one for a lot of the early on draft process, especially around this time last year. So he's getting a product that he needs to then get to the next step the way that he couldn't at the college level in his final year there. But overall, I think that this coaching staff is blessed and cursed with the task of having a young, raw team that's in need of a lot of guidance. You're kind of like getting into coaching because you want to bring that guidance to players. But when you have a roster that is, I think, as full of that as possible, but also you've played yourself into having a have success now position, it does make the job a lot harder for these guys. I don't think the Jaguars fan base and organization now is going to tolerate this team not making the playoffs. I don't think that this fan base and this organization, like the upper organization, is going to tolerate this team not winning the division. And if this team is not winning the division and they're picking in the top 10, they sort of go back to what people expected them to be last year. I think that could be a real problem. And I don't expect that from this coaching staff, just because Doug Peterson, I think, is so good. But I do fear for that for the defense with Mike Caldwell. I think that that's going to be the true test for him, is to develop these young players and not be the reason why this team doesn't reach the heights that they could potentially reach, especially this season where the division's kind of being handed to them on a silver platter a bit. Now let's go and talk about the quarterback, and it's Trevor Lawrence. He gets an 81 to start. But again, like I said at the top, the rankings on these players are what I'm giving them coming into the year and what I expect from them right out the gate. I think Trevor Lawrence by the end of this year could have the last quarter of the season could potentially end up looking like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think that there's a big chance those last 4 games of the year, people are going to be going, wow, Trevor Lawrence is a top 5 quarterback. I think that's very possible. I do think that he's going to have to still work around an offensive line that is not very good, and we'll get to that. And I think he's going to have to still work through some of the young quarterback issues, getting a better relationship with some of the receivers he had last year. Christian Kirk, who had a good year. You got Zay Jones out there. You got Evan Ingram as well. But he's also got new faces. Parker Washington as one and Calvin Ridley as the other. And how they're going to use those guys, I think, is going to affect the way Trevor Lawrence plays, at least early on in the year, and then especially with the way their schedule is set up, and we'll get to that I think will also affect early on success. They don't really have much to speak of in terms of a backup quarterback in C.J. Beathard. There's going to be, I think, some decent quarterbacks on the market come probably the end of the month, early September. So there could be the potential that we might see C.J. Beathard find his way to being quarterback 3, or even not make the roster and then decide to go with somebody else. I think there's a lot of possibilities for that. But there is no question that Trevor Lawrence is the franchise, and I think that they found their guy. Like I said at the top, this is going to be a guy who 10 years from now is going to be looked at, I think, as a Hall of Fame quarterback. He just needs to get there. It's just a matter of when he's going to get to that level where, because not everyone can be Patrick Mahomes. When he gets to that level where it's like, he's the guy. So now let's take a look at the rushing threats, and I think they got one of the better backfields in the league coming into this. Travis Etienne, great year last year. I expect him to build on that again this year. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities as both a first and second down back, a traditional running back, and as a receiving back. Tank Bigsby, super underrated pickup for them. I think him and Etienne are going to make a great 1-2 punch throughout this season. They got JaMycal Hasty as well, who's a really good back. You can hand him the ball as well. As a running back 3, he might be the best RB3 that I have. If he's not, he's up there with them. That doesn't discount either D'Ernest Johnson, who probably is only going to get work in the passing game, in the receiving game, when Travis Etienne maybe wants a bit of a break, but he's going to be competing for snaps with JaMycal Hasty. Tank Bigsby is going to be that guy who's going to be that early down back, and that's really going to be what his role is, I think, this year, as that backup to Travis Etienne on early downs. Then you got D'Ernest Johnson, JaMycal Hasty, who I think are going to be competing for the other backup snaps, so to speak. Those third down passing situation snaps from Travis Etienne. And though D'Ernest Johnson is a little bit better than Hasty, I think Hasty's a much better early down back, and I think that'll ultimately let him win out that role. But I don't think that there's a need to cut D'Ernest Johnson. I think he can still serve a purpose on this roster, special teams wise, even though you got Jamal Agnew. I still think keeping these 4 backs, you're going to have a really solid and balanced backfield. So if you do pick up injuries, or if, somebody's struggling early in a game or through the first couple weeks, or, whatever the things may be, you got some depth here that you can potentially not miss a step all that much. Not taking anything away, obviously, from Travis Etienne. He's the best in all facets of the game on this roster, in this backfield. But there's enough talent there that can be a relief for him that I don't think it'll make this offense suffer all that much. But the dynamicness of the offense with this group, I think this is a real strength of the roster that I don't think a lot of people have been talking about. Now let's take a look at the receiving room. And Calvin Ridley, after taking the year off for his suspension, is back. And they really did steal him in that trade. I think even if he doesn't get back to what he was his last year in Atlanta, his last couple years in Atlanta, that trading him for, I think they traded like a 5th round pick or something for him. Something like that. Something ridiculously stupid. It's worth it. It's impossible to say that they lost this trade. The only way they could have lost the trade is if he didn't get approved to come back and play. I think Christian Kirk is going to serve as a traditional slot throughout most of this year, and then Zay Jones will play on the outside. You got Evan Ingram, who is going to be like your bigger slot, kind of a tight end. He's never been a traditional tight end. He really did clean up his hands last year. As a Giants fan, that was one of the most frustrating things about Evan Ingram, was that after his rookie year, he seemed to have developed butterfingers in the most inopportune of situations. And he did a good job of cleaning that up last year. Credit where it's due. He reestablished himself as more of a premier tight end, so to speak, even though the stat sheet might not have reflected that all that much. I think his impact on the team did reflect that. But this Calvin Ridley in particular is going to be really important to how this offense in the passing game thrives or is just mediocre. Because them going back to Christian Kirk being really the number one receiver, I don't know if that's sustainable. If that makes sense, even though they weren't bad in the passing game last year, I'm just not sure that's sustainable. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone says. To me, Christian Kirk is still completely overpaid. And he really is, to me, just somebody who you put in the slot, and that's where he's going to be the most effective. You look at some of the depth pieces here. Parker Washington, I think, is a very underrated draft pick. Like I said, he could easily be a wide receiver 3 with the amount of snaps he can get. Jamal Agnew is always going to be a threat in the trick plays and screen game. I think that's really where he'll thrive. And then the return game, of course. Tim Jones and Kevin Austin are going to be competing for a roster spot by my estimation. Luke Farrell and Brenton Strange. Farrell was drafted last year. Strange drafted this year. It'll be interesting to see how they compete and how they work out for snaps this year. I think where the competition is really going to be between them is who's going to be that guy they bring in on early downs as a blocking tight end. And I think that's where the competition between Farrell and Strange is going to exist, because Evan Ingram is not somebody that's going to be out there blocking. I think on early situations, you could possibly see Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and then as a bigger slot, Evan Ingram, with then Farrell or Strange as the tight end. I think that's something that we should watch out for, to get Evan Ingram maybe out there matched up in the run game against a slot corner or a safety rather than a outside linebacker. I think that'll be much better use of him in the running game, while also keeping him on the field for the play action game as well. So here's the offensive line, and it's a questionable one. We're going to need to see some moves here. I got Cam Robinson out there still. He's only missing 4 games. It does affect his ranking a little bit to be out those 4 games. Not significantly, but, had to nerf it a little bit. Ben Barch next to him. You got Brandon Scherf, who's a big money free agent, who's going to have to get back to where he was before. He's really hasn't looked like the same player all that much. Walker Little, who I was quite high on when he came out, has some injury history that seems to be affecting him. Maybe if he can finally feel like he's at 100%, this is the year for him to do it. In the center, Luke Fortner, who I really liked last year as well, the center out of Kentucky, I think it was. I liked when they picked him up in the 3rd round. I thought it was a really good draft choice to pick up a traditional tight end. Struggled to say the least, and they do have a veteran, Tyler Shatley, who is breathing down his neck as a real option to take over, and I think it's somebody they'd be comfortable putting in a starting lineup if Fortner doesn't take that next step forward and get over those rookie jitters. Speaking of rookies, Anton Harrison, who they drafted in the 1st round, he's actually going to get an opportunity to start this year. It'll be at right or left tackle, with Walker Little likely at the other for the first 4 games of the year. And in that time, Anton Harrison is going to be able to make a case for himself that when Cam Robinson comes back, that he deserves a spot as a starter in one way, shape, or form, whether it be at guard or whether it be at the right tackle position. I think best case scenario is that Anton Harrison does play really well, and so does Walker Little, and then Anton Harrison maybe ends up at guard, and then they maybe kick Ben Barch into center. I don't know if that's something, does Ben Barch play center? I don't recall. But if you get struggles on the interior in any way, shape, or form, you could always kick Anton Harrison in there. I think that's the ideal situation for the Jaguars, at least for this year, is to make sure that you get all 3 of those guys on the field because they're playing well enough. I think worst case scenario, if to get Anton Harrison onto the field, obviously, is that Walker Little struggles, and then Anton Harrison ends up being the right tackle starting in week 5. Tyler Shatley, like I just said with Luke Fortner, I think there's a possibility that he could end up just being the starter week 1. I think that Fortner is going to get an opportunity to prove that he should start. I don't think that Jaguar fans should be all that worried if Shatley does beat him out. Josh Wells, I think, is a good swing tackle as well to have on the roster. Blake Hance will be competing for a roster spot with Chandler Brewer, I think, throughout most of the rest of training camp. Now, where this offensive line does really take the struggle is in the run blocking. They might be the worst run blocking group in the entire NFL coming into this year. It's a rough group. There's nobody that for me projects to be anything other than average at best in the starting lineup. It's not Cam Robinson's strength. Brandon Scherf, not nearly as good at it. Walker Little's, Ben Barch, not nearly as good at it either. Fortner, who knows what you're going to get out of him. Even in the depth, the only one that's better at run blocking is Josh Wells. Anton Harrison, significantly worse in terms of his performance as a run blocker. That's something that he really needs to develop. That's really his weak spot coming into the NFL. Shatley, not nearly as good. I still think, as an overall center, if you were to just say who's the best overall center this year for them, Tyler Shatley would get that role, obviously. But again, it's the youth movement of Luke Fortner using a third-round pick on him last year that's going to give him the opportunities. I just don't have much faith in this offensive line in the run blocking game. I think that's going to be their inevitable downfall, and it's going to make life a little bit harder for what we just discussed earlier is actually a really good backfield. So they're going to have to, Doug Pearson's got to figure out a way to scheme this offensive line, make things a little bit easier on them to open up the game for that backfield that is so talented. So just going over the positional summary here, in the passing game, they got a really good group. The offensive line is the question mark. And then in the run game, they got really good running backs. Trevor Lawrence is even a running threat. Though you hope that he sort of does the Aaron Rodgers and every single year runs the ball less and less. Just having the threat of the athleticism there will be good enough. But the run blocking, specifically trying to find a tight end that can do it, getting it some production out of your wide receiver room as well. There's no one really in that wide receiver group that pops out as being a great blocker, a great contributor in the run game, and neither does the tight end room. So they're going to have to figure that out to boost up this run game, which the talent's there in terms of the guy that you're handing the ball to. The people making the room for them to actually run are questionable people. And that's really inevitably what drives down my overall ranking for this team. And on the offensive side of the ball is that offensive line, the 29th rush offense, and that's solely based upon what they're getting up front from the 5 offensive linemen and whoever's playing the tight end position as that 6th guy blocking for them. That inevitably drives it down. In the passing game, again, what's kind of driving them down is the offensive line. That offensive line needs to show that they've taken a step forward. And then this passing offense could get into the top 10. But right now they sit dead set right in the middle at 16 for me. The 24th overall offense. And that's really just the reality of really any team in the NFL is if your offensive line is bottom half of the league, even bottom 10 in the league, it really does affect the overall grade of the offense. Now you hope that you can figure out a way that your best 5 on the field will boost these numbers up a little bit, but there's still a gap in talent, in my opinion, on the offensive line that inevitably will hold back this offense a little bit. Now moving on to the defense side of the ball, we'll start with the edge guys, the pass rush. I get an 80 grade to Josh Allen and a 71 to Travon Walker. You hope that he can continue to grow from that throughout the year. Continue to be put into situations to succeed. I think that he's going to have some really good matchups within the division in particular. He's going to go up against probably some less talented guys. Outside of Laramie Tunsil, there's not really a tackle that pops for me. And now, will he be going up against the best tackle more often than not to free up Josh Allen? That could be a possibility as well. On the interior, you got Roy Robertson Harris, Devon Hamilton. Those are your two interior guys for me on passing downs. Devon Hamilton playing that one technique, and then you'll see Roy Robertson Harris kick in and play the three. There is a possibility that Yasir Abdullah, the rookie, gets an opportunity to play on these passing downs. And maybe they do kick Trevon Walker to the interior on these passing downs, and then Yasir Abdullah comes out and he plays on the edge. I think I think it's a legitimate possibility that's something that we could see. Maybe they feel like Trevon Walker can take advantage of a guard rather than maybe a more athletic tackle like a Laramie Tunsil, like a Braden Smith, like Andre Dillard, or maybe Peter Skoronski ends up playing tackle in Tennessee as well. There's a number of Titus Howard just got an extension right tackle in Houston. So there could be some mixing and matching going on here. I don't think Caleb Von Chason and Jordan Smith, I think they've had their opportunities, and I think they are who they are at this point. You look at some of the interior depth. Adam Gotsis, I think, is a solid depth piece. He's an undersized guy. I think he's plays more like a 3-4 defensive end, kind of like Roy Robertson Harris, so he does lose out on that spot. Then Fularunsu Fadukasi is really the guy competing with Devon Hamilton for that bigger body role. Tyler Lacey, who I do like, just not in the passing game. Michael Dogba, same thing. Now against the run, we see Josh Allen get to an 83. I think he's really good in that role. He just hasn't really taken that step forward as being like a true number one edge, I feel. Like he's had opportunities, he's had moments of it where it looked like it, and then he's had moments where it doesn't look like it. So I think we need to get more consistent play from him. But I think as a 3-down edge guy, you're getting somebody who is like a low-end number one with high-end number one potential. Trevon Walker just really needs to get better in that sense. Devon Hamilton, pretty good. Tyler Lacey's getting a real opportunity this year, especially if Fadukasi continues to struggle the way he did last year, to step in on these early downs. The edge group, you're not really getting much of a threat there for Trevon Walker. I think Yasir Abdullah is really the only guy that has the opportunity. I don't know that Caleb Von Chason gets on the field much unless he comes out of nowhere, basically. In the interior group, Fadukasi did struggle last year against the run. Roy Robertson Harris struggled against the run. Those two guys make a lot of money. Devon Hamilton makes a lot of money. They invested a lot of money in those three guys. So the ideal situation is that those three guys are playing all together on early downs. And that's up to Fadukasi to beat up Tyler Lacey, because I do think that of all the interior guys, Tyler Lacey is going to come in and probably be the best guy on these early downs in run defense. So there's going to be some undercurrent of competition that could leave a guy, specifically I think Fadukasi, in trouble of this being his final year with the team. We'll say that. So now let's go to the linebackers. We'll start with the linebackers in the passing game. Oluokun, undersized linebacker, great athlete, can contribute as a linebacker in the passing game. Shaq Quarterman is my number 2 guy in the passing game for this linebacking group. Not by much, but I do think he can serve a role on this team, taking the special teams ability and then coming in situationally. But I do think that at the end of the day, it is Devin Lloyd's job to lose. I expect him to develop throughout the year some more of a presence on passing downs that will inevitably have him stay on the field. As Shaq Quarterman take up more of a role as being like a guy who gets a few snaps every now and then, but is mostly a special teams guy. Chad Muma, you're not going to see him on third down in passing situations. Ventrell Miller, rookie, jury's out on him. But then in the running game, this is where you see Chad Muma really take a step up. I would probably say that I like him as the year goes on more than Oluokun in the run game. But Oluokun does have the ability to play a little bit bigger than what he actually is, too, in the run game at times, which is a real asset. And his athleticism to get sideline to sideline, too, is quite good. And then the depth pieces, you got Devin Lloyd in there as well, who, like I said at the top, he's kind of the third best at everything as it stands right now, which kind of by default makes him the second best linebacker on the team probably, which means by the end of the year, he probably should be getting the second most snaps. I think Oluokun, because he can play all three downs, you just move him around a little bit. He doesn't need to play traditional linebacker all the time. Does obviously make him the top snap getter, I guess you can say, of the linebacking group. And then I think it's really Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma rotating in and out across the game and throughout the downs. And maybe just riding the hot hand will be how Mike Caldwell decides to play it. I think that that's a possibility. Shaq Quarterman, he is great on special teams, so you're going to see him have a really good tackle rate. Plays gaps really well, really disciplined. And Ventrell Miller comes into the league a little bit better in the run game. And I think that they'll keep 5 linebackers anyway, so he'll get his opportunities for sure. Now moving on to the pass coverage, and we'll start with Tyson Campbell, who had a great year last year, and you hope you can build on that moving forward. How the pass rush is going to affect this secondary group, I think, is of concern. Darius Williams and Trey Herndon, they're solid in the roles that they're in. Andrew Wingard is one of those guys who just continues to get work. He's always under the radar in terms of his play, but he's somehow the best safety on this team, by my estimation. Andre Sisco comes in on these passing downs to be a legitimate threat for them. Christian Braswell and Antonio Johnson are their best depth pieces, and they're both rookies. Antonio Johnson, him and Brian Branch, Branch ended up playing up to what people thought, and Antonio Johnson didn't. But when we talked about them early in the draft process, Antonio Johnson was a guy that play on the outside, play him in the slot, and you can play him at safety. So I think that'll be them finding a particular role for him where he'll thrive in the pros. Will probably be the journey he's on throughout this year. Christian Braswell, you play him at cornerback. He's probably your best depth. I thought he was a really underrated draft pick. Rayshawn Jenkins, probably the most overpaid. I think they have the 2 most overpaid guys on both sides of the ball. So take that as you will. Clay Brooks, Tavon Campbell, just sort of depth pieces for secondary work, for special teams work, excuse me. Now we look at the run game, and Tyson Campbell, pretty solid in the run game. Andrew Wingard, fantastic in the run game. The other 3 guys, yikes. I don't see the corners necessarily coming off the field, but Andre Sisco could, because Antonio Johnson is coming in with some pretty damn good run stuffing abilities, run support abilities, and so does Rayshawn Jenkins. Credit where it's due. Braswell does take a little step back, but again, he is a rookie corner. You don't really expect much in terms of run support from corners. Not everyone's Jalen Ramsey, but you would like to have it there, especially when you are dealing with guys like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry in your division. These corners are going to have to come in, gang tackle, help out, and they're going to have to be confident in their abilities to be able to make tackles. I say Jonathan Taylor when he might not even play, but they also got Damian Pierce in that division, Devin Singletary. They got some good running backs that they have to worry about. So looking at the positional summaries here, and they're kind of just a mad defense. Nothing particularly to get excited about. Tyson Campbell, Josh Allen, the development of Trayvon Walker, sure. A solid, I guess, interior group. a linebacker group that's got some potential for growth, but in the immediate, just a very meh. Reflected here in their defensive summary and their overall grades. 22nd pass defense, 20th rush defense, 23rd overall defense. Just a meh group. Again, kind of like the offense, a lot of potential. They get good play out of certain positional groups throughout the season. It could drastically improve their production and their overall grades. But as it stands, they're coming into this season a little bit on the down end, but as a team that I think, again, as the year goes on, they're going to really turn it on. I think that's going to be reflected here in their record predictions. So as you look at the first half and second half of the season for my predictions for their win-loss, it's a very different situation. I have them winning 11 games this year. I think they start sweeping their division. I think that's something they're going to be very capable of doing. Then they get 2 weeks in the UK. One against Atlanta, one against Buffalo. They will have somewhat of an advantage, obviously, against Buffalo, having already been in the UK. They're not going to come home. They're going to have that whole week there. Buffalo's going to be coming in late, have to adjust to the time and everything. But I think Buffalo's still just so much better than them that I don't see that affecting it all that much. They do come back from the UK and they play the next week against the Colts. I think that because they are this much better than the Colts, and I think that they'll outplay the Colts significantly, they will win that game. But eventually the exhaustion, I think, kicks in here. And they're playing teams New Orleans on Thursday night, Pittsburgh and San Francisco, teams that are basically built to wear you out, especially Pittsburgh and San Francisco. They come out of the bye against San Francisco, however, so they'll be a little bit more rested. San Francisco is a lot better than them, so I think that's a win. But I think that coming out of this brutal part of the schedule, 2 UK games, a Thursday night game, they're going to have a real opportunity here to make a run. Now, I do have them beating Cincinnati and losing to Baltimore. That could easily be switched, but I don't see them losing too many games in this little pack here. They got Tennessee twice, which I think are 2 wins. They get Carolina, Tampa Bay, and Cleveland. So I think in that, you've got 6 wins here in the second half of the year. And then all you got to do is steal one against Cincinnati or Baltimore. And you're a 10-11 win football team this year, and you've rocked the whole division. Maybe the Colts catch them coming off that UK stretch, which, I mean, they're getting hours back by traveling back to the United States. So there is an advantage to that as well. That it'll probably be easier to make the time adjustment, getting the hours back rather than losing the hours in the travel through the time zones. But I think that getting Tennessee and Houston, you're playing San Francisco right out the bye weeks. You're going to have time to relax. Maybe you play a little bit better against San Francisco than you expect. Get some confidence coming out of there. What's San Francisco's quarterback situation going to look like? They might be able to pull that one off. Who knows? But I do think that as the season goes on, they're going to get better and better, and then they're going to hit this stretch here, and they'll be playing, I think, with such high confidence. They're going to have such opportunities to gain confidence that they'll be able to ride it out. And just running through the overall summary, 11-6 division winners of the AFC South, 6th best team in the conference, the AFC. It says NFC there. Sorry. 9th in the league, 12th coaching staff. But the overall player grades and the positional grades are starting out the year on the lower end. So my prediction is this is where they start, and I would probably say make them 5 spots better in each of those groups by the end of the year. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair move. 5 better in each spot. Let's say that. And there you have it, my number 9 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the AFC South champions. They're going to go back-to-back. You heard it here first. Probably not. I think that's a pretty fair assumption. Please like the video and leave a comment in the comment section below. It's going to help out with the algorithms, help the videos grow, the channel grow, and hopefully make me some AdSense money one day. I appreciate that. And subscribe. You have to subscribe as well. That would be great too, so you don't miss the rest of the series and any of the videos I got coming out in the future. And I will see you guys next time. there's the options right there. I'll see you guys next time.